Okay, let's begin. We are on Daf Tetvav Amud Aleph, 15A4 if you're following the art scroll, at the bottom of the left column. Avel Asur B'Tichboset. So we know that the halacha is that an Avel is forbidden to be able to wash their clothes. So they're supposed to, from the beginning of the Shiva, they're supposed to wear the same clothes. They can't wear fresh clothing.
Avel is always 7, right?
Sorry?
Avel is always 7 days. That's what we talk when we say mourner.
Generally, when we're talking about Avel, we're talking about the period of Shiva, not the Shloshim. Okay?
And the Shloshim, what is it? What's the status of the person in the Shloshim?
They're in Shloshim mode.
But what are they called?
The whole year is Avel.
Right.
But it's the dinim of an Avel of the year and the deal in Avel of the 30 days and the dinim of Avel of 7 days are different dinim. For anything but a parent, you have two sets. You have the 30 and the 7. And then when it comes to a parent, then you have the 7 and the 30 and the full year. Okay? So the Gemara says, Avel. Sorry? No. Different halachot for each level.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Diminishing returns. Okay?
So all these purposes were 7.
Yeah, what we're talking about over here, the Isur, is during that period of time. Avel Asur b'tichboset. He's forbidden from laundering his clothing. Tichtiv, vayishlach Yoav Tekoa. So Yoav sent off to Tekoa, which is the name of a place. He took from there a very smart lady, and he said to her, "Ablina, I want you to sit avelut, v'livshina bigdei evel, and wear the clothing of avelut." We need you to go on mute, Nathan. V'livshina bigdei evel, and wear the clothing of avelut. Ve'al tasuchi shemen, and don't anoint yourself, don't smear oil on yourself. V'hayit ki'isha ze yamim rabim mitabelet almet, and you will be, for the duration of that period of time, for that long period of time, you'll be like a woman who is mitabelet, who is sitting shiva for someone who's died. Now, Rashi over here on the spot tells us.
That's told you that.
Here we go, right here at the bottom. Where is it? No, 1 second. Where was it?
What do you mean pretend?
Where is this here? Oh, here we go. Okay, so you see it's in the pasuk is in the inside column over here. Dalid, you see it?
Yeah, Vayishlach Yoav Tekoa.
Yeah. Okay. So what does the pasuk tell us? Now, first of all, who is Yoav? Yoav, we know, is the general of David HaMelech. Mm-hmm. We've actually mentioned this before. How fascinating it is that Yoav ben Tziruyah, who's the general of David HaMelech, correct? He ironically conquers for David HaMelech. They need extra room, so they conquer Syria. And it's fascinating that one of the common names in the Syrian community is Tzeruya. That's Yoav ben Tziruyah. That's where it comes from. He was the one who conquered Syria himself. All right? Now, so we just have, you think to yourself, well, what do you mean? They all come from Yoav ben Tziruyah. We just have a guy who just walked in now, who comes from?
I said Eli.
Comes from Eliah Cohen.
Is that fact?
Yeah, fact. In fact, they always say it out loud. They say Tawil Me'Eliah Kohen. What does Tawil mean in Arabic? It means long life. They were named Tawil for long life because there was a kilala in Bet Eli, and the reversal of that was through the behavior and studying Torah and whatever the case might be. All right. So the Gemara mentions about Abaye and Rava that were descendants. We talked about this before. Says the Gemara, okay? So Yoav,
He's the general of David HaMelech.
Yeah, general of David, yeah? And the idea was that Yoav was now trying to be able to put back together, to make shalom between David HaMelech and Avshalom. So who's Avshalom? Avshalom is the son of David HaMelech.
He's trying to kill him.
But specifically, the son of a Eshet Yefat Toar. Okay, what does the pasuk say? A person who's with a Eshet Yefat Toar, right? Then Sorah Morer. So Avshalom.
What was that?
So when you take it, what's Eshet Yefat Toar?
Beautiful.
Is the woman you take in captivity,
Right.
at war. The pasuk says, It tells us Yafeh Torah. What's the next chapter? If you'll have two wives, one of them has a son, is the Bechor. The other one has another son. And you choose the other son because you don't like that one. The Rashi says, why don't you like that one? The answer is because she was Eshet Yafat Torah. So
even though she goes through all that, you're gonna have a Ben Soreh Moreh?
yeah, because the desire to be with her comes from a place of ta'ava, not from kedusha. Yeah. So what happens with the child? The child is now ben soreru moreh. So the Gemara is doresh that's a connection. So Avshalom was ben soreru moreh. He attacks his father. Literally, is trying to murder his father, hunting his father. Very beautiful, always playing with his hair, always stunning. But he filled this role. So anyway, so in the end, so Avshalom, David HaMelech is now chasing Avshalom when the tide turns. So Yoav is trying to kind of put them back together. So what does he do? He constructs a story that he's trying to tell David, and he's going to make the story about this girl who's lost somebody, right? And in order to have her come in, and then he's going to play a game and then say, oh, David, you see, da-da-da-da, like that. Where did he learn this from?
So, sorry, tell me the strategy one more time.
Yoav is trying to put them back together. And in order to put them back together, he's setting the stage by having this woman be sitting in Avelut. But she's not really. She's just a very smart person. She's acting the part.
Tamar?
So no. She's acting the part. And in order to make it more believable, so he has her sit Avelut properly. Now, when she's going to come in, he's going to start saying, "Oh, you should have Rahmanur on your son. Shuf the lady, she lost the kid." Da, 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 da. He's going to pull a whole move. Yeah. Huh? No.
I thought with Yitzchak when they come
No.
changing in the clothing.
You guys are thinking much too far out of the box.
That's a good head to be. Usually we have to.
David HaMelech has already had this happen to him.
When he sends the husband to war.
No. Well, yes, but no. Yes, but no. Yes, with the story, but no. Come on.
Takes me back to high school.
When he takes Bathsheba, Natan Hanavi comes, and Natan Hanavi says, I need you to rule on the case. David says, oh, what's the case? He says, there's this guy, and he has one sheep, and he lives next to a rich guy, and the rich guy has tons of sheep, and the rich guy's hungry, so he takes the one sheep that the poor guy has, and he slaughters it, and he eats it, and then David's like, we gotta kill this guy. What kind of terrible person? Natan is like,
You.
that's you. You have many wives. This guy only has one wife. You sent him off to war, and now he died. Are you going to take his wife?
I know that story, and there was no way I was getting that.
All right, you know the story. So Yoav is now pulling a card. He knows that Natan got David HaMelech to say chatati, to change his mind, because of this kind of a sketch example that he had David rule on, and then said that this is you.
Does this happen after that?
Yes.
So did David learn from that and how to do this? Not sure.
Not in this point. Not in this point. No, no. Also, they weren't comparable. But Yoav, that was Yoav's strategy at this point. So either way, the point is, this is one of those examples we said. How could you learn halachot? Divrei Torah, midivrei Kabbalah, lo yalfinan. You never learn halachot from the Navi, only from the Torah. What was the answer? We quoted the Gemara Baba Kama. The Gemara Baba Kama says, it's true that you don't learn Divrei Torah, you don't learn halachot from Pesukim in Navi, but when can you learn halacha from Navi? Let's see who's really listening.
When it repeats something from the Torah.
Well, then you don't need it because it's repeating in the Torah. No?
When it says that this is the custom we followed.
Good. That's called Gilui Milta. So when the Navi is saying, oh, this is what they always did. The Navi is not introducing something new. He's just stating something that was a fact. So you're not learning it. It's not that the Navi is saying this is a new mitzvah or a new halakha. That you can't do. But when it's Gilui Milta, you could use Divrei Kabbalah for Gilui Milta. Exactly. So over here, what? We learned it previously in Moed Kattan. Okay? Now, says the Gemara, right? You see that Yoav told this woman in a regular conversation, I want you to behave like a mourner. And then he lists what he wants her to do. Included in what he wants her to do, what does he include? He says, I want you to right? Wear the clothing of Evel. Don't wear new clothing. Don't wear fresh clothing. So you see clearly, right, that the halacha is that an Avel is not allowed to wash clothing. All right? The Gemara asks, so what's the case in the other two? When it comes to someone who's been excommunicated, someone has tzarat, are they allowed to launder their clothes and wash their clothes? Gemara answers, Tashma, let's answer. Minudin u'mitzorain asurin l'saper l'chabes. Someone who is minudeh and someone who is mitzorah, they're not allowed to take a haircut or to wash their clothes. So very explicitly it says that the halacha is that they can't also wash their clothes. Says the Gemara, Avel chayav b'kiriyah, is an Avel obligated to tear his clothes? We learned the Torah said to the Bnei Aharon, right? Lo tifromu. I want you to make sure that you don't rip your clothing. What do you see from here? If Hashem had to say to the Kohanim, listen guys, this is the special inauguration period now. Don't rip your clothing. What do you see there, everybody else? Everybody else would have had an obligation to rip. So from, what's that called in the language of the Gemara? I want you to remember this. Michlal lav, ata shomea hen. Michlal lav, from a general rule of no, ata shomea hen. You learn yes. Okay?
General rule, no.
Yeah, like klal.
Yeah.
A general rule, lo. Ata shomea hen, you're learning yes. So in other words, if the Torah had to tell you something was a no, you understand that without this case, it would be a yes. Okay? That's the idea, that when you look at something and you know that this is an explicit expression telling you one thing, I know that without that explicit expression, I'm actually learning a positive halakha. So what's the halakha over here?
Didn't you say the Metzorah is allowed to cut their hair if they couldn't cut their hair before Chol HaMoed?
Yes.
So he could cut his hair during Chol HaMoed.
Yes.
So he was saying...
No, that's during Chol HaMoed. Here we're now asking on the basic principle. You're telling me he's allowed to cut it on Chol HaMoed, that means he's not allowed to cut it not on Chol HaMoed. Where'd you learn that from? Gemara answers from the Mishnah.
Right.
You got that?
No.
Okay. I love your honesty. The Mishnah says he's allowed to cut it on Chol HaMoed. What does that tell you? Not on Chol HaMoed. That he can't cut it.
Right.
The Gemara says, how do you know that? What's the source that a mitzorah is not allowed to cut his hair during the week?
Yes, I mean,
Where'd you get that from?
Cut it at Chol HaMoed.
Yeah, it must be not on Chol HaMoed. On a Tuesday, he can't cut it. How do you know he can't cut it? As the Gemara, we have a Mishnah that says it explicitly.
You can, but you can't. Oh,
Exactly. Okay? Now, says the Gemara,
Rabbi, you just referred to in terms of the generalization, that's a pratu klal or no?
Pratu klal is a limud. Michlal lav ata shomea hen is that from cases where there's a negative law or a negative limud, we'll learn that if you don't have that negative limud, then the answer would be yes. The way the Gemara uses it is like an opposite inference.
Is it one of the 13 or it's a 14th?
No, it's not one of the Yugim Midot. I don't think. Yeah, all right?
No, it's not.
It's not in Rabbi Yishmael. It's not in the
In
Braita.
the morning. It's not one of them.
Yeah?
Oh.
So, no, because Klalu Prat has an element. Klalu Prat has an element of that in it, but it's a more robust.
You skip between Bikota Shacha and Vaidaber.
Okay.
Careful, you're going to make him start saying.
I know. By the way, every time I see him, I give him another item.
Yeah, he's going to start avoiding you, by the way.
He can't. I'm in the same building.
Start with him.
He washed his hands yesterday.
Ishtabach
He
Semo.
didn't know what, I was the only guy in the shul. I was embarrassed.
Yeah.
Getting it alone.
Yeah.
Gotta go up and down.
When you say he made me wash my hands, you mean it literally.
No, he came over.
You actually washed your hands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotta go do it.
Ishtabach Semo. Did you next time you're the only candidate, you also got to go up the stairs and take off the shoes. Okay, says the Gemara. Avel is obligated to rip.
Shul on 61st. They're looking for members.
And you know what? And the one on 61st Street, you don't have to do Birkat Kohanim at all. So the Torah says You like that one? The Torah says that what's it called? That they should not rip their clothes. Everyone else would have an obligation to rip their garments when they're avil. Gemara says, "Minudes." What about someone who's been excommunicated? Does he have to rip his clothes when he finds out he is excommunicated? Gemara says, "Teku." We don't have a source to tell us that a minudeh has to rip his clothes. Okay, so what would that mean? In a scenario where I have no proof one way or the other. So we already discussed this. There are times when a teku, we don't know, so you got to be strict. There are times where we don't know, so you can be lenient.
Deoraita is strict and Derabanan is lenient?
Excellent. So one way of deciding is Deoraita Derabanan.
One way.
So mid-deoraita, because the halacha is safek deoraita lichumra. Whenever you have a doubt in something which is from the Torah, you go to the strict side. When you have a doubt on something which is midrabanan, you go to the lenient side. This is safek deoraita lichumra, safek derabanan likula. Okay, that's the general rule. But there's other examples also. Teku, let's say you have a teku where it's midrabanan, but it's not relevant that. Like, let's say me and you are having a monetary argument, and the Gemara ends. What do you do in that case? Teku. Okay, Teku, who do we pay? Take who? What do you do? What do you do? So remember we said this? Hamotzi mehavero alav haraya. What does that mean?
Burden of proof.
Excellent. You're taking from somebody else. The burden of proof is on you. Now, that language, that's one way of saying the same thing as saying muhzak. What does muhzak means? Like Etz Chaim Vila Machazikim Ba. Possession is 9/10 of the law. Yeah. If I'm holding it and you want to take it from me, you can't tell me maybe. You have to tell me for sure. You have to prove it. So the muhzak always holds on to what he's got whenever there's a question. So teku is a form of a question. So in a teku, where it's between two people, so we would always say, Hamotzi mehavero alav haraya. You want to take it from me, you gotta. But there's many examples like this of teku.
In this whole thing, we don't have any rabbanim saying Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi. There's just a.
The Gemara doesn't. There's not a machloket. You're complaining the one time there's no machloket.
Oh, that's why.
Usually you're complaining machloket. Now there's no machloket. You're like, where's the other guys? What, are they sleeping today?
Just stating the rules.
Yeah, stating the rules. Yeah, no machloket.
No, but we didn't see this ever.
There's sometimes you see it. Sometimes you see, sure.
Sometimes Jews agree.
With Sinai and Oker Harim. By the way, he already made another appearance.
You told me he
He already made another appearance, but you didn't. I was waiting to see if anyone noticed. Who is Sinai? Who is he? Who remembers?
That was his nickname.
Yeah, but what is his real name? It wasn't Giovanni. Who is Sinai?
You haven't seen Giovanni in a long
You haven't seen him in a while. Who is Sinai? You guys remember? You got it in the notes there.
No, further back.
It's a while back. Yeah. Sinai is Rav Yosef. Sinai is Rav Yosef. Yeah. Okay. So Sinai is Rav Yosef, but we just had Rav Yosef, but we didn't call him Sinai. So I was waiting to see. You said, when's he coming? I said soon. And I waited to see if anyone caught that Sinai made another appearance. The other one is Oker Harim, but we didn't come to him yet. Okay. Says the Gemara. Okay. So Teku, we don't know. There's a third example. What's the third example? Teku, another example. Well, there's many. Another example is Teku deoraita, strict. Teku derabanan, lenient. Teku between two people where one guy has the object, possession 9/10 of the law. What happens when you and you come to me, and each of you gives me $100, and then one of you gave me a second $100?
He's the guy.
That's called maneh shlishi, the third 100. After a week, you both come back, and each of you says, I gave you 200. Now, I know that I owe you each 100. I just don't know who I owe the third 100 to.
Okay.
Pay the first guy first.
Who's the first guy? There is no first guy.
Stronger guy.
I don't know which guy gave me the third.
That's stronger.
Give the $100 to the Beit Din until it's resolved.
So that's a non-move. The halacha is Yeheh munach ad sheyavo Eliyahu. It should rest until Eliyahu Hanavi comes.
So you keep all the money? You keep 300?
It's with
You put it in the market.
Another 100.
It's an escrow.
It's an escrow.
No. 1 and 2. He gave you each back one.
Oh,
He
only
doesn't
the
know
third
the second
hundred.
gets.
No.
The
So
third
1
one
second.
keeps.
So why don't I give them each 50?
100?
Because one of it's wrong.
Why don't I give them each 50?
Because one doesn't get
At least, how about the other guy says, you know what, I'm willing to take 50.
No, but that's
Not the guy.
That's
not
good.
the guy who's taking the
That's a
50.
fake.
Says the Gemara.
Yeah.
Says the Gemara, you can't do that. You know why?
You have to write it down.
Because then you encourage a Ramai to make the claim, the false claim of the third 100.
No good.
Because he's going to get 50.
Because he knows they'll get 50.
Why don't you just tell him to write it
If
down?
he knows that he's going to argue with the other guy and he's not going to get anything, so there's no point in him arguing. You got that? Genius.
Brilliant.
So we take away any advantage of lying on the second 100. Brilliant. Huh? Sorry? Lev dafka. No.
Don't you have to swear?
Yeah.
You have to make a
Swearing is in certain cases. The Gemara talks about when we'll do
This is a
shivua.
foolproof system.
There's lots and lots and lots and lots.
What about believing
Lots
the
of
guy?
stuff
Yeah,
there.
but you-
But
What
that's
about believing the
that's
guy?
right. That's in the beginning of Baba
What
Kama.
if you believe a guy?
I
One
have
guy
no
goes, I don't
benefit.
remember.
Baba Mitziyah, excuse me.
I'm sure I gave you 200.
That's something else. That's something else. Joe is introducing a whole new item. But that's not teku.
No, he's talking about this.
That's not teku.
Liar.
You introduce a whole new. Your sugya is called Bari V'Shema. That's a whole different sugya.
Shema, I'm missing.
What happened?
no, because
What even Shema?
Shema.
Just give him that.
I don't understand that.
Bari V'Shema is like a delicious smoothie that has berries and shemas. Okay.
He says,
Bari is for sure.
He gave you the 200.
Huh?
He says to him, believe
No,
me.
one guy says Bari Shema is. One guy says I'm positive I gave you 100. Other guy's like I'm not sure. I think I may have given you an extra 100. I'm not sure. That's Shema, maybe. Bari V'Shema, we always say whenever there's a vadai for sure and a maybe, the vadai, the for sure always wins.
Sure.
So Bari V'Shema, Bari Adif. But there's many. We'll get involved.
My phone's running out of memory.
When we hit Baba Mitzvah. By the way, don't delete it before I upload it. He has 900 extra gig. He's like, it's taking up one. Okay, fine. Says the Gemara. Now, Mitzorah, okay? Ma'u b'kiriya. What's the halacha for Mitzorah? Does he have an obligation to tear? So when it came to Minudeh, we don't know. When it came to excommunication. What about Mitzorah? Does a Mitzorah have to tear or not? Gemara says, Tashma, let's learn. Big Adav, we already saw this. Big Adav yihiyu firumim. His clothing should be firumim. We said, what does that mean? Sheyihu mikoraim. They should be torn. Shma mina. You see from the Braita that it turns out that a Mitzorah is tear. Now, by the way, we know this already. Why? We just saw this. Machloket Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva. What does a Mitzorah do to his hair?
Cut it.
One opinion says, cut it. One opinion says, let it grow.
We left it unknown.
Machloket Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Akiva. Remember? So, what was the question? The question was, it says, firumim and farua. So the Gemara says, one second, the clothing you're telling me to rip. So when it says that the hair, yihiyu, maybe that also means to tear. That's Rabbi Akiva. So the same way you're tearing the clothing, you should be tearing the hair. The other opinion says, no, tearing the clothing is different, and the hair, you let it grow. That's how Rabbi Eliezer says, okay? So the reason we should have known this Mishnah, because this is where that Mishnah is quoting. Gemara says, Shem Koreim Shema Mina, we learn from here. Now, one second, I just want to point out, okay, I'm sure, I didn't see the notes, but I'm sure that someone points this out. This Gemara that we just brought a proof that a Mitzorah has an obligation to what's it called? To tear his clothes, that's according to everybody. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva don't argue on the clothing. They only argued on the hair. We just got ahead of ourselves when we were talking about the hair because we learned the halakha from the hair from the halakha of the clothes. Okay? Everyone agrees that a Mitzorah tears his clothes. Okay, it's a pasuk.
The pasuk on the of Vayikra, this pasuk
Which pasuk?
under the Yov one. ויום משה אל אהרון ולעזר ותמר פניו ושתם אל תקראו בגדיכם. That one?
Sorry?
This is the pasuk that we learned from.
This is that pasuk, yes.
But what does that translate to?
Before
Don't.
Chol
What is al tifra ubigdechem lo tifro?
That's the machloket. The machloket is, I know what bigdechem lo tifromu means. I know what that means. But I don't know what roshechem al tifrau means.
Got it.
The
Okay.
cutting we're talking about before Chol Moed, right?
Sorry?
Before Chol Moed.
We're talking about nothing to do with Chol Moed.
Okay, I just want to get that out of it.
In other words, not just before Chol Moed. Nothing to do with Chol Moed. The Mishnah tells you that the Minudeh and the Mitzorah and the Avel, that their Avel, Mitzorah, Minudeh ends on Chol HaMoed, is allowed to cut their hair, is allowed to wash their clothes, is allowed to do this, is allowed to do that. Now the Gemara is asking, so what you're telling me is that they're otherwise, on a random Tuesday, they can't cut their hair, they can't wash their clothes, they can't Where'd you get that from? And the Gemara now has gone on a long research and development mission to find out what is the halakha for each one of these cases with regards to each one of these prohibitions. But we're talking about nothing to do with Chol HaMoed. Al Mishnah only was talking about when all of these things are asur, when it comes to Chol HaMoed, you're allowed to do it. Okay, let's continue. Says the Gemara, Avel chayad b'chfiyat mita. We actually covered this, if you guys remember.
With the,
Right? We covered this in two places. Avel is obligated in kfiyat mita. What does it mean, kfiyat mita? They would turn the bed completely upside down. Okay? Now we'll talk about it, what it exactly means later. The Tani Bar Kapara said, right? Demut diyukni natati bahen. The Hakadosh Baruch Hu said, Demut diyukni, which means my face, the copy of diyukni of my face, natati bahem, I placed on them. Uba avonetehem hafachtia. But when they sinned, I turned over the image, so to speak, of what's it called? This image on humanity. Kafu mitotehen alea. So if that's the case, since I did this when I had to, because of abonot, I had to turn over the likeness of the comparison to God's image, again, whatever that means. So too, when a person, when someone has a velut, they have an obligation to turn over their bed. So we learn from one to the other. One concept of kfiyah, of turning over the likeness of God, two, turning over the actual bed. Okay? Let's continue. Now, I just want to make this clear. God doesn't have a face. So what does it mean that God made the face of humanity look like it? What does it mean that mankind was created in the image of God? Yeah, what does that mean? God doesn't have a tzelem. It doesn't have a shape. So what do the words mean?
In the for the midot.
Huh?
For the midot.
Excellent. So let's look at the top Rashi, top line. Dimut diukno, b'tzelem Elohim asat adam. God made mankind in the image of God. So what does that mean? The rabbis explain b'tzelem Elohim means that they were capable of free will choices. Okay? That's the concept of b'tzelem Elohim. Okay, so let's continue.
because God has free choice.
Sorry?
Ultimate free choice.
Since God can choose whatever he wants to
So
do.
in that vein, you have the same.
Correct. Now, animals don't have free choice. Someone once asked, do non-Jews have tzelem Elohim? So the answer is non-Jews have free will. Right? We know that. They have an obligation to do 7 mitzvot b'nei Noach. What does that tell you? That they could choose not to do it. So they have also, there's an element of tzelem Elohim, but it's a smaller element of tzelem Elohim because the commandments are smaller. So therefore their free will is more narrow. So therefore their comparison to God is more narrow. Of course, that's only true if a person doesn't make the jump from 7 to 613. Okay, let's continue. The Gemara says, so therefore there's an obligation, there's a halacha, that they would turn over their beds, so to speak, as a form of kapara.
We don't do that anymore, right?
No, we don't do this anymore. There's something that people do as a minhag, but we'll cover it when the Gemara mentions it. We have it towards the end of the Masechet. We'll get a little bit more into it there. Now, what's the connection between God's image and turning over that image, and when somebody dies, turning over the bed. What's the connection between those two things? So since the idea of mankind dying, so God created man in the image of God. What brought death to the world?
Eating the apple.
The sins, when we didn't listen to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that choice to do evil is what caused mitah, which removes the demut yukno, which removes the likeness to God. Exactly. So therefore,
You lose your choice when you do against the way.
yes, I don't know if you lose it or you're not exercising it. When you're doing an avon, you're not exercising free will, you're just acting according to your desires and your nature. Right? So the choice, the choosing of Tzelem Elokim is the choice to fight your base instincts and do the correct thing. All right? So let's continue. The Gemara says, Mirudeh Mitzorah, huh?
I never heard of the bed.
There's some people that still do it. They turn over the mattress. We'll cover it. We'll cover it later.
When, at night when they sleep in?
Yeah, for the whole time of Shiva. Menudeh Mitzorah. What about a excommunicated person and a mitzorah? Ma'hen b'chviyat hamita. What about them when it comes to kfiyat hamita, to turning the bed over? Do they also have this halacha? The answer is, says the Gemara, no, teku. We don't know. We have no proof. Tekus. Okay. Now, by the way, what would the teku tell you over here?
Let's do it. So we're asking about a mitzorah.
A mitzorah and a minudeh on kfiyat hamita.
It would tell you to probably do it. To earn.
Hold on 1 second.
What do you think?
You're saying what is like halacha l'maaseh?
Yeah, what would be halacha l'maaseh based on what we discussed earlier?
So
I think they do it.
I think they don't do it. I think it's not a deoraita.
I think it's
not a
time.
possession
Rabbi
thing.
didn't answer when I said to do it, so I think.
No, I'm trying to go.
I'm not. I didn't. I need a. I don't need a yes or no. I need a logic.
Trying to
Yeah.
use the logic. It's not a possession item.
Okay.
It's not a positive versus a somewhat positive. So it's got to be a deoraita versus a derabanan,
Okay.
right? And is this a derabanan?
You tell me.
I don't know that it's a deoraita. It's from the,
You tell me. What do we just learn? What did we just learn on the person who died?
the overturning is
Tane Bakapra. Where does that come from?
It says B'Tselem Elokim. Hashem said it.
Okay. Hashem said Tzelem Elokim. Did Hashem say turn over the bed?
no.
Okay. So where'd that come from?
It came from bar kapara,
No, but that's not in the Navi.
overturning the
That's-
bed. That's from the Gemara.
Oh. So if you can't find a deoraita source for turning over the mitah, what would it be? Drabanan. If it's a teku, that we're comparing it to the cases, because we don't have a source for mitzorah and minudeh. We're comparing it to met. And the met itself is midrabanan. So on a teku, if we don't know what the halakha would be, what would you do? Lenient. Excellent.
What do you mean the met is the Rabbanan?
When someone dies,
Oh, you're saying
and the avel, the halakha of kfiyat hamita by avel. So the pasuk of Tzelem Elokim is from the Torah, but the idea that because the Tzelem was overturned, therefore turn the.
I got it.
He had the
Careful, he's going to turn over your chair. By the way. Okay. Says the Gemara. The Gemara says, Avel asur ba'asiyat melacha. Avel is asur, is not allowed to work. So this one we know. The kfiyat hamita is less known. Less people talk about that one. But we know Avel is not allowed to go to work. Dichtiv, because it says, V'hafachti chagechem la'evel. The pasuk says, and where's this pasuk? Take a look in the side of the commentary. V'hafachti chagechem la'evel. You see it? It's in Amos. Is Amos 5 books of the Torah? No. So it would seem that this is from Midrabanan. Okay? Dichtiv v'hafachti chagechem la'evel. Machag asur melacha, just like a hag is forbidden in melacha, af avel asur melacha, also an avel is forbidden to work.
What's the connection with the chag?
Sorry?
What's the connection avel and chag?
No, it says, I will turn your chag into avelut. Okay? Says the Gemara, just like if you're telling me, you're bringing the two things together, you're comparing them. Just like a hag is asur, so also avel will be asur. And that's what Hashem was saying. So this is a hekesh on a pasuk in the Navi. The one exception would be, is it possible for it to be deoraita? It's possible.
This pasuk.
It's possible
How is it possible?
because maybe this is just revealing the nature of the isur, like we said. Divrei Torah b'divrei Kabbalah lo yafinan. You can't learn it from there, but it might just be revealing something that it expects you to already know. But without having a specific proof for that, we don't know that it's deoraita. Okay?
Can't I say the reverse though? Because if we went back to when we said don't with Aharon and they said don't rip the clothing because you want to do that, they worked that day.
What do you mean?
The brothers went into his brothers. They continued the service in the Mishkan, so they worked. Couldn't I use that as a
No, because
proof? Because that I would be allowed to work.
you mean that why did the Torah need to tell them to do so?
Right, because
Yeah.
they were working.
Yeah, but I don't know. Would you call kehuna working?
It's the kehuna is always separated from
Not work.
all
But
the
it's
stuff.
service,
the
no?
cutting and
What
the
about on
hair.
Shabbat?
Right.
So I don't work.
No, what I'm saying is a kohen works on Shabbat in the Beit Hamikdash,
Serves.
right? Yeah. So if it's it would be. No, he's asking a brilliant question. He's asking, why don't we just prove from the fact that the Torah had to tell them to do the work in the temple
When they shouldn't have-
that everyone else
assume not to do.
not to do. Michlal lav ata shomea hen, right? So that's what his question was. The only question is it a comparison? Because when you're talking about cutting hair, not cutting hair, ripping, not ripping, it's the same. When you're talking about what they do versus what I do, I work in the stock market. They're working in the Beit HaMikdash. They're serving, they're bringing korbanot. So would you be able to draw that conclusion? I'm not sure. But either way, the Gemara does not bring it from there. The Gemara says, we learn it from a hekesh from Chag to Evel. The Gemara says, Minudeh, what about when someone's been excommunicated? Ma'al basiyat melacha. What about doing work? Amar Rabbi Yosef.
Yes,
There he is. Amar Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef says, Tashma ki sha'ameru asur basiyat melacha. When they said that it's asur melacha, right? Lo ameru ela bayom. Now, what's this talking about? We learned about this in Masechet Ta'anit, excellent. When in Masechet Ta'anit, when we said that a person was not allowed to go to work, lo ameru ela bayom. We said that only was during the day. Ava balayla mutar. The nighttime, everyone was allowed to work after the fast was over. V'chen ata motzeh. Also, you find b'minudeh u'ba'evel. Also by a minudeh and a evel. So Rabbi Yosef had a braita, and the braita says that a minudeh, an excommunicate, and an avel was allowed to work not in the day, but at night. So what does that tell you? It tells you that he's not allowed to work, at least in the day.
Why didn't we just say that the mourner wasn't allowed to work?
Sorry?
The mourner was not allowed to work.
Avel.
The mourner was not allowed to work, correct?
You said that at night.
At night. So I said, so we learned two things. We learned that the avel is not allowed to work during the day, which jives, but that the minudeh and the avel is allowed to work at night.
Which would mean that the Avel is allowed to work at night.
That's what the braita is saying. I'm not saying that's halakha.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay. The Gemara says, my, right? Lava kulu, right? It's not talking about, isn't it talking about all the things in the braita, right? Because it says, v'chen ata motzeh, and so do you find b'minudeh ba'evel. So whatever's in the braita is also in the end. So in other words, let's just review. When we said that it's asur melacha by a fast, lo amru ele bayom. We only said during the daytime. Ava balayla mutar, but at night it's allowed. And also, so do you find, right, by a mourner and by an excommunicate. The Gemara says, my love, doesn't this also mean to go back on everything that we mentioned in the braita, which means working at night and not working during the day? The Gemara says, no. It's referring to ashara on all the rest of the halachot in the braita that we do not have here, the part of the braita that preceded this. We were never comparing minudeh and avel to the laws of ta'anit with regards to working. So also by these two was not referring to work. The Gemara thought It was saying the same way you work during the day, don't work at night by ta'anit. So too, avel, don't work during the day, work at night. So too by excommunicate, and that would answer that you see him excommunicate is working during, is not allowed to work during the day. The Gemara says no. The also by this was not referring back to the work part of the Braita at all. It was talking about the other practices of someone who's at a ta'anit.
Don't take that from that, but I
Exactly. We're going to end here. 15b1.
Okay, we got it.
Accent.
This is our last one.
Guys.
A vacation on a